Hello everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Wehry Weekly History and Entertainment News. It is now officially 2021, and events are slowly coming back into fold. However, normalcy is going to be a long time, so on this week's episode, I'll be discussing what the state of Massachusetts is planning on doing going forward. Plus, this week's episode will be focusing on the history of Pittsfield, by far Berkshire County's largest city, and the people, places, and things that make Pittsfield so fascinating. And by the way, each new episode of WWHEN will now run 2 weeks until more arts and entertainment events begin opening up. First, it's time for this week's trivia question, which will be answered during our Pittsfield History segment. This week's question is, what is actresses and Pittsfield native Elizabeth Banks' real name? Arts and entertainment venues in Berkshire County struggled last year, as well as many throughout the country. Thankfully, they will now be receiving part of a federal grant package. In this package includes $15 billion in federal aid sent to performing arts companies. Many local artistic directors and CEOs expressed hopefulness that the deal will help their businesses over the next year. Julianne Boyd from the Barrington States Company said, quote, "I think it's fantastic. I wish it were more for all the theater and performing arts companies in this country," end quote. While Mark Volpe, the CEO for the Boston Symphony Orchestra, added, quote, "It's reassuring to see an obvious recognition of the economic impact that the performing arts have. There's a sense that we're an integral part of the economy," end quote. Furthermore, Kate McGuire, the executive director of the Berkshire Theater Group, added, "Since we, as in local theaters, weren't necessarily part of any major advocacy for that program, then it was probably an initiative of major Broadway producers," end quote. To qualify, eligible applicants must have lost at least 25% of their revenue. Those that have lost more than 90% of their revenue can apply first, 2 weeks after the bill becomes a law. Grants are capped at $10 million. Stay tuned to WWHEN for more information, or call your local government officials. Now, it's time for this week's extended history portion of WWHEN. This week, we will be talking about the history of Pittsfield, Massachusetts, Berkshire County's largest city, and my hometown as well. The current population is just over 44,000 people, but its largest population was over 57,000 people in 1960. I'll be getting to why the population may have decreased later in the segment. First, however, a description of how Pittsfield was founded. In 1738, Jacob Wendell, who was living in the city of Boston at the time, bought 24,000 acres of land in what is now Pittsfield. It was originally known as Pontotoc, which is a Mohegan Indian name meaning a field or haven for winter deer. Over the next 20 years, settlers, many of whom were of European descent and lived in the western Massachusetts town of Westfield, which had already been established in 1669, arrived in the village of Pontotoc. The population grew exponentially, and by 1761, over 200 people lived in the village. That same year, it was decided that the village should be renamed to Pittsfield. It was named after the then British Prime Minister William Pitt, 1st Earl of Chatham. By the way, there is also a Pittsfield named after him in New Hampshire. By the end of the Revolutionary War, Pittsfield had approximately 2,000 residents. At the time, it was primarily an agricultural area and had many mills. These produced paper, lumber, textiles, and wool for merino sheep. If you are curious about the relationship between sheep and Pittsfield, make sure to check out my September 30th, 2020 Sheeptacular episode on YouTube. Pittsfield officially became a city in 1891, the same year that business owner William Stanley, who had recently relocated his electric manufacturing company to Pittsfield, produced the first electric transformer. The electric manufacturing company was a forerunner to Pittsfield's internationally known corporate giant, General Electric. By 1903, the new General Electric, which had only been around since 1892, bought the William Stanley transformer plants in Pittsfield. The company then became known as Pittsfield Works of GE. Under the urging of German-born engineer Charles P. Steinmetz, General Electric joined the plastics business in 1912. It was here that GE became a worldwide corporate power. Steinmetz had unveiled a 120,000-volt lightning generator, which would be useful for creating electricity to produce plastics. Over the next 20 years, General Electric grew exponentially. The peak employment at GE in Pittsfield was in 1943. That year, over 13,000 people worked for the company. This also explains the rise in Pittsfield's population. More people were working at GE than ever, and had heard about how great the business was. Plastics in GE really started to take off in 1953. That year, chemist Daniel Fox created Lexan. Lexan was the flagship product of General Electric. It is a polycarbonate that is frequently used in engineering. It is found in everything from CDs and DVDs to car bumpers. Once GE started producing Lexan, it became one of Berkshire County's biggest businesses, even though employment never quite reached the heights of the 1940s and 1950s. The peak business for GE was in the 1980s. For instance, in 1988, Pittsfield's division neared $5 billion in profits. This marked the third straight year GE had increased profits. Unfortunately, from the 80s through the early 21st century, there were significant tensions between workers and owners, and there were several strikes during this time period. Finally, Sabic, which had purchased GE's plastics division in 2007, leased its administration building to Pittsfield. Most of the administrative employees working there were relocated to Houston, Texas in 2016. Even though General Electric is long gone, Sabic still has an influence in Pittsfield with General Dynamic Mission Systems, where the plastics building used to be. According to its website, quote, "We solve the toughest security and technology challenges facing our nation and its allies by building smarter, mission-critical products and systems," end quote. It is currently hiring engineers from entry-level to advanced, and along with Berkshire Medical Center, it is the top employer in Pittsfield, as well as Berkshire County as a whole. Now that General Electric has moved on, Pittsfield is now known as an arts and entertainment haven. Some of the more famous venues in Pittsfield, which you can find discussions on in previous episodes, include the Colonial Theater, which is one of the oldest theaters in America, having originally been founded in 1903, the Berkshire Museum, Barrington Stage Company, the Berkshire Athenaeum, Wacona Park, which was originally built in 1914, and more. Pittsfield has clearly moved beyond its agricultural days to become one of the best small cities for arts and entertainment. Pittsfield has more entertainment stories than just theaters and baseball stadiums, however. For instance, did you know where the Imperial Bowling Alley is now was originally a roller skating rink? Opened in 1952 at 555 Dalton Ave by William and Doreen Broyles, it was the largest in the Berkshires, with a maple floor skating area of 7,480 square feet. On opening day, 2,000 people came to skate, and another 3,000 came to watch. These numbers remained steady throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s. However, as roller skating faded away, so did the numbers of people showing up. William Broyles sold the arena in 1987, where it was transformed into the Imperial Bowling Alley. Another popular event was, and still is, COVID notwithstanding, seeing movies in the theaters. Today, the only major movie theater in Pittsfield is the Beacon Cinemas, but there were several on North Street. One of the most famous ones was the Capitol Theater. It was originally built in 1898, but didn't start showing movies there until 1922. The first movie shown there was Beyond the Rainbow. One of the major draws to the theater was the fact that it had marquees. These show movie and actors' names above the theater to really highlight the movies playing. The theater closed in the 80s, but it still stands today as the Ralph J. Froyo Senior Center. Another popular theater was the State Theater, also known as the Showcase. It was founded in 1920 at 424 North Street, just past where St. Joseph's Church is. It first opened as the Cameo Theater and mostly showed B-list movies. It was renamed to the State Theater in 1948. One of its biggest draws was Saturday Cartoon Fest. Kids would pay 18 cents, equivalent to $2 today, to see 12 or so short cartoons. In 1967, it underwent another name change to the Showcase. This lasted until 1987, when the rise of places like the Berkshire Mall created another destination for movies. North Street would not have another movie theater until the Beacon Cinemas opened up in 2008. Thursdays on North Street were popular even before Third Thursdays became a thing. Throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there were at least 100 retail stores in the North Street area. On Thursday nights, stores were open until 9 p.m. That's when General Electric's payday was. Stores competed cleverly to attract shoppers. For instance, one of the most frequently visited women's department stores, Textile, once staged a men's night on a Thursday before Christmas, with a fashion show and refreshments. The goal was to entice male shoppers to buy their loved ones gifts, clothing, or accessories. And it actually worked, drawing an estimated 1,000 male shoppers. Another popular store on North Street was England Brothers. It was founded in 1857 by brothers Moses and Louis England, hence its name. During its 131 years on North Street, there would be many firsts. The first delivery truck, the first store with an elevator, and the first escalator in the county. It is remembered by many for its window displays and high fashion. The shift to malls and retail markets, unfortunately, marked the end for the England Brothers, and they closed in 1988. Pittsfield's public school system is wide and varied. At one point, due to the Pittsfield population boom, there were over 20 elementary schools. As Pittsfield's population decreased, so did their schools. The former schools included Hibbard, an alternative school located at 280 Newell Street, Dawes, which was located on Elm Street, Highland, which is now named Capeless, which I will be discussing shortly, Plunkett, located on 1st and Fenn Street, Briggs, located on North Street, Crane, which was located near Dalton and Benedict Aves, Pomeroy, located on Pomeroy Ave, Redfield, located on Elizabeth Street, Pontoosuc, another former North Street school, Nugent, located at the Pittsfield Junction, Abbey Lodge, formerly on Holmes Road, Morewood, a historic one-room schoolhouse at South Mountain Road. Now it is on the National Registry of Historic Places, and Rice at 55 Spring Street. Additionally, there were different parochial schools, such as St. Mark's Elementary School at 400 West Street and St. Joseph's High School at 414 North Street. While both of the churches are still in place, the schools have shut down due to enrollment issues. Currently in Pittsfield, there are 8 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, 2 high schools, 1 private school, and 2 colleges. The elementary schools are Allendale, located at 180 Connecticut Ave, Capeless, named after a former mayor and located on 86 Brooks Ave, Conti Community Elementary, located at 200 West Union Street. This school was named after a former Massachusetts House of Representatives member who was born in Pittsfield. Crosby, which was originally a middle school and is located at 517 West Street. Egremont, located on 84 Egremont Ave. Morningside, located at 100 Burbank Street. Stearns at 75 Lebanon Ave. And Williams, located on 50 Bushy Road. The 2 middle schools are Theodore Herberg Middle School at 501 Pomeroy Ave and John T. Reed Middle School at 950 North Street. They were both founded in 1953, but at the time named South Junior High and North Junior High respectively. Eventually, both changed their names after respected educators in Pittsfield. The 2 high schools are Pittsfield High School, located on 300 East Street. It is the older school, having been built in 1931, and Taconic High School, located at 96 Valentine Road. It spun off of Pittsfield High School when that school became too big in 1968. Today, it is known as a strong vocational school. The only private school is Miss Hall's School. It is located at 492 Holmes Road and is one of the most selective boarding schools for girls in the Northeast from grades 9 through 12. The 2 colleges are Berkshire Community College. If you're more curious about that, watch the August 26th episode for more information. And Mildred Ely, located on 100 West Street. This for-profit college offers career training for programs like business management, cosmetology, massage therapy, computer information technology, and more. Many famous people have grown up in Pittsfield. They have left their mark in space exploration, sports, social justice, and even Hollywood. This small city has a lot of famous natives. One of them is astronaut Stephanie D. Wilson. Born in Boston, Wilson moved to Pittsfield in the 1970s. She was obsessed with NASA growing up. and with the encouragement of her parents, decided that her career would take her into space. She graduated from Taconic High School in 1984, Harvard University in 1988 with a Bachelor's of Science degree, and the University of Texas in 1992 with a Master's of Science degree in Aerospace Engineering. After graduating from Texas, she worked for 4 years at the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California, before being selected by NASA to be an astronaut in 1996. After almost 10 years of training, Wilson made her first trip to space on July 4, 2006. She spent 13 days on STS-121, which was flown by the spaceship Discovery. Wilson was only the second African-American woman to go to space. She would take 2 more flights on STS-120 in 2007 and STS-131 in 2010. Her space story is not over yet, however. It was recently announced that Wilson would be one of 18 astronauts who would be traveling to the moon this decade. With her next trip, Wilson will have set a record for the most trips in space for a female African American. Baseball in Pittsfield is extremely popular, namely because of the previously mentioned Wahconah Park. One of the all-time great Pittsfield baseball natives was Mark Belanger. Born in 1944, he was a star player for both the baseball and basketball teams at Pittsfield High School. His 1,455 points in basketball remained a PHS record until 2003. However, he really stood out as a shortstop. Signed out of high school by the Baltimore Orioles, Belanger spent all but 1 year with the team, winning a World Series trophy in 1970. Belanger was a phenomenal defensive shortstop. He is an 8-time Gold Glove winner and one of the best defensive shortstops of his era. During his time with the Orioles, the team won 90 or more games 11 times. Eventually, he worked for the Players Association, and he helped to end the strike that canceled the 1994 season. Sadly, Belanger passed away from lung cancer in 1998. Today, there is a baseball field named after him located at 375 Newell Street. Tony Gibson was one of the few people in Pittsfield to make his mark in both football and social justice. He graduated from Pittsfield High School in 1967 and then attended a community college in California before moving even farther west to play football for the University of Wyoming Cowboys. This part of the story is amazing by itself. How someone from Pittsfield, Massachusetts could play football in Laramie, Wyoming, almost 2,000 miles away, is incredible. While there, however, Gibson became embroiled in one of the biggest controversies in college football history. In 1969, a week before a game against Brigham Young University, or BYU for short, Gibson and other members of the team heard racist slurs from fans. At the time, BYU was racially segregated, and being a Mormon college, did not advance African Americans into priesthood. Gibson, along with 13 African American teammates, walked into Coach Lloyd Eaton's office in search of how they could protest BYU's racism. Eaton, following the University of Wyoming protocols, then kicked all 14 members off the team without giving them a chance to state their case. Gibson and his fellow teammates became known as the Black 14 because they paid the ultimate price for protesting racial inequalities. At the time of the incident, Wyoming was undefeated and nationally ranked at 5 wins and 0 losses. But the controversy and media attention caused the team to downward spiral, and they finished their season at 6-4. Lloyd Eaton was also fired at the end of the season. For years, African Americans stayed away from playing football at the University of Wyoming, and Tony Gibson never played a down of football again. Gibson refused to even step foot in the state of Wyoming for many years, until he received an official apology, which he did 50 years later as part of the 50th anniversary of the Black 14 in 2019. Our next famous native from Pittsfield also supplies the answer to this week's trivia question. As a reminder, this week's question was, what is actresses and Pittsfield native Elizabeth Banks's real name? The answer is Elizabeth Mitchell. The reason for this is because of Screen Actors Guild, or SAG, rules. There was already an Elizabeth Mitchell in the SAG by the time Banks started her career. SAG rules forbid actors and actresses from sharing exact names, so Banks used her mother's maiden name instead. Banks is one of the most versatile actresses of the screen today. She was born in 1974 in Pittsfield and graduated from Pittsfield High School in 1992. As a point of interest, both her and I received theater education from the same teacher. It just goes to show how strong the Pittsfield High School is with their theater. She has been in film and television since 1998, and her career highlights include the original Spiderman movies, the Hunger Games series, the Lego movie series, and TV shows such as Scrubs, 30 Rock, Modern Family, and more. She also moved behind the camera and directed one of 2015's biggest hits, Pitch Perfect 2. The film earned over an astonishing $183 million in America alone, which places the movie in the all-time top 10 highest-grossing movies directed by a woman. Stephanie Wilson, Mark Belanger, Tony Gibson, and Elizabeth Banks may have all been born in Pittsfield, but their successes took them all across the country, the world, and even outer space. That ends this week's episode of Wehry Weekly History and Entertainment News. You can watch this week's episode on channel 1301 of PCTV, CTSB-TV, and NBC-TC. Airtimes on all three of these networks vary. Visit the websites shown here for more information. Also, if you would like to see the episodes in HD quality, make sure to check out my YouTube page at